sending a packet in the cloud versus sending a transaction across rollups using a production Interop protocol today, we're looking at 357 million times more expensive. If I'm a Web 2 builder and I look at that cost, I will be like, I'm not going to build with this technology.
When you combine efficient interop, when you combine compute over data, exogenous data, AI agents, you can reach these like cypherpunk applications that you can actually look at and go, oh wow, that wasn't possible without crypto.
I'm here with Bo of Polymer and Ismael of Lagrange. Thanks for joining me, guys.
Yes.
Thanks for inviting me in this pretty awesome studio. This is great. I mean, I've been lugging around podcast gear all week, and this is the way to do it. So,
I mean, you are committed. You are a professional podcaster.
Well, obviously not, because I mean, like this setup is next level. So, but I wanted to talk to you guys because there's been tremendous progress on the Lagrange side with the ZK co-processing.
Yeah.
And also Polymer just made a pretty significant announcement this week.
Huge.
Huge. It's a huge announcement.
Big computers, small proofs.
Yeah. And also you guys are working together. So I'm going to sit here and ask you questions, and you guys are going to answer, and I'm going to nod and pretend to understand everything you guys are saying. And hopefully, the people watching this will also learn a little bit and expand their minds. So yeah, maybe starting with you, Ismael, what's the latest at Lagrange?
Yeah, so at Lagrange, we have earlier this year shipped our decentralized prover network, the first version of it, into production on top of EigenLayer, run by 85 institutional operators with people like Coinbase, Kraken, P2P, OKX. And we've been accelerating on integrating our ZK coprocessor, which sits on top of our prover network, with a lot of our partners and customers, as well as expanding the types of proofs we generate on our network to be able to better deliver this kind of universal verifiability across crypto. And so Bo and Polymer are a team that we've known for quite a while and have had a very good relationship with, and are one of the groups that we're the most bullish on in the space. And so very excited to be here, very excited to talk a little bit more about Lagrange, how we work with Polymer, and kind of how we see the Internet of Verifiability evolving.
Whoa, Internet of Verifiability.
Yeah.
It's a step up.
That is.
I love it. So like, what are some of the crypto use cases maybe are like obvious to a lot of us, but and I'd love for you to talk a little bit about those. But outside of crypto, what does this enable if we expand out and sort of think more broadly about the types of use cases that we could enable with Lagrange's infrastructure?
Yeah. So several years ago, when I was in San Francisco and I was starting Lagrange, and I tell the story all the time, someone came to me and they said that in 2 years, every app would be a cross-chain app. And at the time, I was a little taken aback by the statement. This was before the roll-up vision of Ethereum had really materialized. And the idea of like an app on Polkadot, like bridging to a DEX on Near, was like a little kind of crazy to me. But I sat there and I watched it evolve. And now where I sit, I can't see a single DeFi app that doesn't take a wrapped asset. And I can't see a single real DeFi app on a rollup that doesn't deploy another rollups. Like fundamentally, the statement that was made was so prescient. And so directionally, what I like to say is we're moving for every app in the world, in Web3 and Web 2, to be a verifiable app. One where the core functions are proven. All the way from how exogenous data is loaded on chain with ZK TLS, to how execution is extended with ZK coprocessors, to how block space is proven with ZK rollups and ZK execution environments, all the way to Interop, and how you prove state between chains with with these kind of interoperability connectivity tissue like Polymer. And so I guess to kind of bring that back into very concrete terms, whenever you go to a site on the internet, whenever you see a piece of news, whenever you interact with an AI model, I see a proof being attached to that.
Yeah.
in the future.
Yeah, the ZK TLS stuff is one that I find very interesting. I remember talking with on Epicenter this Turtle protocol. I don't know if you guys.
Not super familiar.
Okay, so I mean they were sort of like innovating with this ZK TLS stuff a couple of years ago, and now there's like more teams building on top of this. Like, can you just maybe for the audience like expand on what that means exactly? Because I think it's such an underrated use case.
Yeah. ZK TLS is something that I'm fundamentally excited about. Opacity is a team I'm very bullish on. There's others, obviously.
Right, Opacity is the one I've recently heard about. That
they're fantastic. I think very highly of them. There's others that we also think highly of. Pluto, Reclaimed, Chainlink has their Deco product. But in general, the basic theme is there is certain private off-chain data. And you want that data to have some property of it proven on-chain. You want to prove your credit score is greater than 750 without disclosing it on-chain. You want an application to be able to consume a property of your data without the actual data ever being disclosed. And you want to do this so that you can build more intelligent on-chain systems that are secure, that are data private, and that are user-friendly. And that's what ZK TLS gets to. And as you start loading more exogenous data on chain, you need better tooling over proving computation over that data, because the more data you have, the more expensive it is. And let's face it, Solidity is not the right language generally to write data-heavy computation. And then you need to be able to move these commitments to this off-chain data between chains. And so you create this new landscape of what it is to build in crypto as these applications can compose with exogenous Web 2 data sources.
Yeah.
Think credit markets, think ride-sharing apps, think any type of thing you'd want to decentralize that we've been hearing for years people would build. Now it's possible.
Yeah, and I think the simplest use case for me, and maybe for people to maybe wrap their heads around ZK TLS, is every time you need to provide some form of identity verification, KYC, right? You need to download like the PDF of your bank statements and send it to some other financial institution. It's like this really painful process, which actually provides very little actual verifiable data because it's some PDF that anybody could forge, and it just points to kind of the uselessness of KYC. But here at least what we could do with ZK-TLS is say, okay, here's a proof that this like HTML that was downloaded or like this PDF came from my bank, and this is the information that they provide. Now, you may or may not trust the bank. I mean, as a third-party financial institution, you may or may not trust that bank. But assuming you do, or assuming that third-party institution does, then they could read that proof, read that signature, and know that that information came from there without actually having perhaps access to the information itself. And that's kind of like, for me, such a low-hanging fruit use case that someone should be building, right?
It is. And I think there are teams doing that now.
Great.
I think what the space has kind of shifted towards is this idea that infrastructure by itself isn't something that people want to just buy endless exposure to with tokens. What people want is apps that they use and infrastructure that generates real revenue from real usage. And a lot of the great work being done by teams like Lagrange, a lot of the ZK TLS teams, and teams like Polymer are really kind of getting to that end of a new Web3 experience for users with new types of apps that are possible.
Yeah. I feel like if we zoom out a little bit,
let's zoom out.
Let's zoom out, get a world view of what's going on right now. I think it's really interesting. You guys are talking about ZK TLS. It feels like the certificate issuers themselves, we're talking about roots of trust. And you have roots of trust for the internet, whether the trust is rooted in a central entity like a bank, whether the root of trust is rooted in the world computer, Ethereum. And as you go down the line, you can imagine that the root certificate issuer, and there's a few on the internet, can be related to Ethereum, where Ethereum can be the root of trust for all of its layer 2s and layer 3s. And then you can kind of imagine, if you extend this even further, that there's like this addressable space of centralized applications rooted in trust and centralized entities. And then you have this decentralized root of trust in Ethereum, and this decentralized chain IP space for all the L2s and L3s that could exist. And you see this like mirror image of itself, what it was and what it will be. Like,
right.
Interesting.
But that also, I mean, in this mirror image, this decentralized mirror image, that we don't have all the issues with the current certificate model and roots of trust.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But, so in essence, the internet is an internet of trust.
Yes.
And what we're building is an internet of verifiability.
Yes.
Where you can verify the authenticity of information and the authenticity of data.
Yes.
Instead of just trusting.
Yeah. So these are like kind of like two mirror worlds where I don't necessarily think that the other is just going to completely go away, but I feel like the two will start to become like very, very much intertwined, and we're kind of seeing that happen now. It's kind of like when you see like two universes like start to merge, and it's like reality starts to blend, and then when you blend the reality, you can make product magic on top.
I love that. And so effectively, ZK TLS is the way you bridge between that internet of trusted authorities and that internet of decentralization.
But it's sort of it's a half step, right? Because I mean, the issue remains with TLS and certificates generally, and I'm going to butcher this, but maybe you guys can explain it better than I can. But that because there are so many certificate issuers, and because these certificate issuers, the root certificate issuers, issue certificates to all these other entities, that trust has been eroded through malicious or untrustable or untrustworthy certificate issuers that can essentially like forge certificates. So maybe just expanding on that so we understand like what that actually means and what the vulnerabilities are.
So Seb, I feel like you're trying to say that, or you're implying that you think that the centralized issuers will eventually get replaced by Ethereum, and then perhaps the bank's root of trust at that point now is tied to that of Ethereum, where the bank is now like an L3 in terms of trust. Whether they run a centralized, L3 or not, that's up to them. And they're represented on this decentralized web through a verifiable view into its whatever they want to expose. Some of it's going to be via zero knowledge because they don't want to publicly expose, like your bank account information. And some of it's going to be public information via the public API.
I love this point because the idea of issuing a digital identity that is not owned by you, but you are identified by, is an incredibly risky proposition. We see this with social handles. We see this with Discord handles. Effectively, we see with Telegram accounts. So much of your identity is tied to these digital accounts you have that are your username, with how people recognize you and connect with you. And the moment one of those is taken or compromised, you can lose a massive amount of your personal reputation. And you aren't, in fact, the owner. You aren't, in fact, the custodian of these things, except if they're on-chain. And an example of this would be, if you guys are familiar with a very common Discord vulnerability, if you have a vanity URL in your Discord and your boosts expire below a level, you lose the thing. And so all of a sudden, someone takes, Discord/Polymer because you're on vacation 1 week. It's an incredibly risky situation to be in. And social accounts are the same thing. You see Telegram hacks and nobody can ever recover them.
Like domains not being renewed.
Exactly. It's all of this.
While you're on vacation.
It's all of this stuff. And this is kind of the idea of verifiability, self-custody, and trust for the centralized system.
Actually, this is interesting. This example sort of extends also, I think, to lending, because the same thing can happen, right? You could be on vacation and get liquidated, but if you had some sort of a credit rating that, like, a trustworthiness rating that ensures that this address is going to be like, has a certain credit rating and is going to be good on their debt. Then maybe we can sort of
that actually makes sense.
Go away, like get away from this over collateralized kind of lending model and more towards like a credit model.
Yeah. You could even integrate the two. Like if you're late on payments, the payments are reported to the credit authority. And they would treat those reports as marks on your credit, and then that will go down, which is another form of liquidity because you're able to use that rating as leverage.
Absolutely.
Exactly. And one of the things I find really exciting, just the one thing to take a step back, is when I got into crypto, there were all these like cypherpunk ideas of what we could build. There was, on-chain credit. There was all these ideas that the future substrates for human communication would be blockchains. And then what we ended up with was a bunch of basic financial primitives like over-collateralized lending and liquidity and constant product DEXs, and like Ponzi's. And then we had like 3 years of this. And then we had a bunch of infra And this idea that, infra's useless, we built too much infra, what are we gonna do now? We still just have Ponzi's indexes. But now I think we're getting to a point where there's like real interesting things being built, because when you combine this, you can get to something that's net new. When you combine efficient interop, when you combine compute over data, exogenous data, AI agents, you can reach these like cypherpunk applications that you can actually look at and go, oh wow, that wasn't possible without crypto.
Yeah. And I don't know if you guys were at the Rejected event yesterday, but Jim from Catalyst gave a talk basically on this very kind of topic. And what was interesting is just sort of, I think a lot of us came into crypto with these kind of cypherpunk ideas and wanting to overthrow the financial system and wanting alternatives that are more fair and don't profit incumbents. And his argument was that we've kind of lost the plot. And like the meme coin direction is this very nihilistic direction, when there is actually like virtuous direction, which is to double down on the cypherpunk, on the primitives of crypto, of Bitcoin, and which like ZK absolutely aligns with.
It does.
Fundamentally, like it is a technology that enables sovereignty over one's data, and I that's one of the reasons why I came in the space.
What I love about ZK, and this is like my cypherpunk take about Lagrange, is it allows you to build a expressive, unstoppable application. When I was first getting into crypto, there was the term an unstoppable application, this idea that you could deploy a smart contract that does something and nobody could stop it. You could be in a country that has capital controls, that stops you from accessing anything besides their fiat that has a 50% annual inflation. All your savings could be eroded. You could have zero access to a store of value, and you could buy Ethereum, and you could get real market exposure to it, and you could put it into a productive yield-bearing vehicle. And the limitation was what you could build on chain. What ZK lets you do is to remove that limitation. You can have a single person generating a proof for an incredibly complex application. And as long as one person can generate the proof of the state transition or the proof of the application function, it can verify on chain, you can do it. You can have DEXs, you can have complicated financial systems that are verified on chain. You can have a satellite generating the proof. No one else in the world can do it possibly. And there you go. The system works still. Yeah. One person has to generate that proof for AI, for complex financial primitives. But I mean, one thing I'd love to kind of touch on here, because I've been talking a lot about Lagrange and ZK, is this idea of Polymer connecting the world computer.
Yeah. So, tell us about the announcement you made yesterday and what it means for interoperability. I mean, you guys have been working on interoperability solutions for a really long time. I think we first met in like 2022. Yeah. So it's been a long time coming, but Polymer is finally live, and I think it's really exciting. So
yeah, and thanks for having me here to chat a little bit more about this. We changed how we saw the world, I think, during this process. I think similar to Ismael, it wasn't clear when we started Polymer that rollups would be the future. It's very clear now. And during that transition, we started to focus on the question of what is it going to take to bring more of the world on chain. It's a hard problem to solve. I think when you really start to dig into the problem, you'll start to see that we will have rollups. It won't be 1,000. It won't be 10,000. I don't even think it's going to be 100,000. I think it's going to be millions, perhaps even billions of rollups. Some small, some big, some ZK, some optimistic, different types of rollups. And when you have all this, you'll have a lot of fragmentation. And coming from the Cosmos, I'm quite familiar with fragmentation, both at the social layer and from a technical perspective.
Oh, yeah.
But the one thing that held the Cosmos together was IBC. The one thing that people could actually agree upon.
Socially and technically.
Yeah, socially and technically. They couldn't agree on anything else. Like, they're always arguing. If you ever follow Cosmos folks, you see they're always arguing about something. Which is natural, right? Like, they care a lot about sovereignty. When you have sovereignty, you're just not going to agree on certain things.
Exactly.
Yeah. So to me, like, IBC is kind of like English. Like, it's something that can be shared, something that people, won't necessarily need to fight over. And it's essentially a common layer and common good for all to I guess, connect upon. But the one problem that we realize is the major blocker to IBC being effective in the rollup ecosystem was this concept of Ethereum finality. And we worked on this RP called RP 7789 that allows rollups to essentially be able to communicate sub-finality safely. We established a few different safety invariants. Won't go over that in the pods, somewhat technical. But breaking the finality barrier is kind of like breaking the sound barrier. Once you break the sound barrier, you can go Mach 1, Mach 2, Mach 3, Mach 4. But before that, it was kind of like this impossible thing. Like you would tell people like, oh, like I can communicate fast. On Ethereum, they're like, but what about reorgs? What about Ethereum finality? Obviously, I think Ethereum is going to work on single soft finality. We're going to eventually get there. But that was kind of like the elephant in the room. And as we made this journey, we also worked with partners like Lagrange to increase the verifiability of the system. Because on one hand, you can go very fast, but you have to trust the sequencer. On the other hand, if you want to go a little bit slower, you can trust Lagrange's state committee solution, which adds crypto economic security. This acts as like a validator set. This is very common in the Cosmos. So this is like the Cosmos model of interoperability. You have validator sets for each chain. They're able to communicate effectively in a trustworthy manner.
So how did you solve finality? Can you get into that?
Oh, you want me to go over in like the technical details or? Oh,
yeah.
Let's dive in.
Why don't you blow our brains a little bit?
Okay. I'm going to take a not super technical angle.
Take us down the road of finality.
Let's use time travel and like interdimensional time travel. So multiple dimensions plus time travel.
You lost me at time travel. So
you have these two story elements that are like commonly used. You see in the Marvel films, right? Like time variance authority.
Right.
You can both travel back and forth in time, but also across dimensions, like Spider-Man. Also,
so I need to watch more Marvel movies to understand Polymer.
Just watch a few Marvel movies. It'll make a lot of sense. So because of reorgs, we try to establish a few safety invariants with using this time travel concept, using this interdimensional concept as a basis for intuitively understanding this. If you're in the future, you can't communicate with the past.
Yeah.
Like I can't just call up my past self. Like I'd actually have to travel back in time, hop in a time machine, go back in time, and be like, hey man, you should really focus on learning ZK. Or, but I think the other thing that we also do is you also can't communicate across different histories. So imagine that every Ethereum fork is an alternate dimension. And if I'm in one dimension and you're in another dimension, we can't communicate with one another unless we travel across these dimensions. And the third thing that we do is we establish a few safety invariants that we convert into what we call a contingency diagram or contingency DAG of all of the transactions that have been committed across rollups, and we link the states of every one of these rollups together. So to link the state of two rollups, we have to say one, we're in the same dimension. Like we can contact each other. Two, we're in the same time. Meaning that I have to be able to call you. If I can't call you on my cell phone, there's some either time temporal gap, or there's like a dimensional gap. And once we establish these links, we say that if we need to travel dimensions, or if there's a reorg, we reorg together. It's all or nothing.
I love that.
And depending on whatever view of Ethereum actually gets finalized, and we can think of this as like the sacred timeline, that when all these alternate dimensions, alternate realities get pruned, that the property that we ensure is that these transactions that were committed cross rollup either get committed or not. Basically, if we're on the canonical timeline, all these transactions get atomically committed. If we're on an alternate timeline, we've already traveled dimensions, all these transactions now get reverted. So you have this really nice atomicity property.
Interesting. I love that.
You mentioned earlier something. You said that when you came into crypto, that there was this assumption that we'd have cross-chain apps and everything, right? And I think 2 or 3 years ago, that was kind of the assumption. That hasn't really played out. A lot of cross-chain transfers are just token transfers. There's no this idea that we'd have cross-chain applications commanding liquidity across different state machines. It hasn't really materialized. How does Polymer enable this future that we've been envisioning for a long time and hasn't really materialized?
My perspective on the reason why it hasn't materialized is it's very difficult to build something competitive in an existing app category. if you think about existing categories that are highly, highly competitive, you're talking about the latency of the application costing the application perhaps millions, billions of dollars in lost revenue. So if you look at an Amazon, they conducted a study probably like a decade and a half ago. And at the time, every 100 milliseconds of latency in their app decreased the revenue by 1%. This translates to, I think, $40 to $50 million then. Now it would be $5 billion every 100 milliseconds. And the thinking there is, if I'm going to build in a competitive category, social media, e-commerce, can I build in this category with a huge handicap? If I shoot myself in the foot and I try to run a race, how fast am I going to run? And I think if we take a step back and myself coming from a Web 2 background, if I were to want to take technology seriously, I need to know that it can perform. When we did due diligence at Uber, we would look at a system, we would say, how much is this going to cost us? How is it going to perform now? How much is this system going to cost us and perform in 10 years' time when our scale is 100x where we are today? And I think the answer to that question today isn't pretty. And when we look at the cost of compute on chain, we see that compute has come down a little bit over the years as we have layer 2s, layer 3s even. But it still costs a lot. It's like, I think roughly we took a look at a single transfer transaction on an L2, and we compared that to a single write to an AWS database.
Yeah.
We're at about 30,000 times more expensive for compute, but that's come down a lot. That's come down a lot over the years. Like, this is already orders of magnitude less than it was before. I expect this trend to continue. There's a lot of high performance rollups coming up, and this trend should continue. Also, like, bringing the compute off chain, making it verifiable. All these trends will make the compute a little bit cheaper for these apps. But the problem is that the cross rollup space, the cross block space costs are incredible. That has not come down in the last few years. When we looked at that cost, we realized that sending a packet in the cloud versus sending a transaction across rollups using a production Interop protocol today, we're looking at 357 million times more expensive. So that gap, that's a chasm. If I'm a Web 2 builder and I look at that cost, I will be like, I'm not going to build with this technology. This does not make sense. If I have an app, it's already tens of thousands of times more expensive to build. And when it comes time to scale this app, am I going to pay hundreds of millions of times more cost on me? I'm not going to be able to make a profit. So I think for builders to take us seriously, we need to invest in both scaling the L1, scaling at the L2 level, scaling at the L3 level, scaling with ZK, scaling cross rollup interop, scaling all these things, and get to a place where those gaps are much closer than they are today.
Can we get there though without compromising on, the cypherpunk decentralization sort of ideas and primitives that we were discussing earlier?
I believe we can. And I believe we can because it's very much a choose-your-own-adventure game with cross-chain on Polymer. There is a spectrum of security that an application can opt into, ranging from zero-knowledge proofs of the state committees we talked about on Lagrange. We can talk about the canonical finality of rollups writing to L1, their state roots, and then we can talk all the way to kind of sequencer attestations. And you're able to select the level of security that your application wants based on your cost preferences. And systems that are complex and allow you to express trade-offs between security and cost embrace a cypherpunk ethos while still allowing you to operate within kind of your own sensitivity to, obviously, the amount you want to spend this in the packet.
Yeah.
I like how Ismael is describing our product suite for us.
I have a good background in it because we've worked with you guys for a while.
How are you guys working together?
So we use Lagrange's state committee product. The state committee problem was what I would like to describe as a light client for optimistic rollups. I don't necessarily consider a sequencer level guarantee the same as a light client. It's not equivalent. A sequencer level guarantee is more like a guarantee from a single proposer. A light client guarantee is a guarantee from a set of validators similar to that of like a Cosmos L1. And you get crypto economic security at that level. And if you want to extend this further, as I just want to describe, you can get to like roll up a native bridge, which is you're going to wait a lot longer. And I think Lagrange sits nicely in the middle where you can get very good security at medium latency, Where perhaps for an application, if the trade-offs are, if you're sending value, maybe if you're sending less than $100, maybe the sequencer pre-conf is okay. If you're sending between $100,000 and $100,000, maybe you want to use Lagrange state committee. And maybe if you're sending like a massive transaction, like tens of millions of dollars, maybe you'll use the world native bridge. There's like a spectrum here.
So the announcement you made is, so currently it's enabling message passing between Optimism and Base.
Yes,
Right.
2 chains to start, and we'll be adding more soon.
But it's message passing. So there isn't a excuse me, there isn't yet a token bridge that's up for builders to build that. You're providing the underlying infrastructure for people to come and build interoperability between rollups.
Yes, and that's intentional. We've seen a lot of interoperability protocols come to market and build the DeFi on top of their interop protocol. Layer 0 built Stargate.
Yeah.
You have all these different protocols that are kind of essentially funded by the core team, and that kind of deviates from their focus on the interop itself. And we felt like it was our job to focus on interop. We don't want to dictate terms. We don't want to create an OFT standard and force people to use this standard. We want to say we want to support open standards. Whatever token standards get adopted, whether that's XERC20, whether that's the new ERC that's proposed by Uniswap and across, we want to support these token standards, ICS20 and the Cosmos. We want to support these standards as a pure infra layer.
Right.
And I think that's what the goal of a messaging protocol should be.
And so you guys have focused a lot on IBC in the past, or at least that was really part of the kind of go-to-market and narrative of Polymer. Is that still part of the way you're building these interoperability primitives?
Yeah, so we support IBC. Out of the gate, we have a virtual IBC protocol. Now, I guess because of IBC Eureka, that's considered IBC Classic. And now there's IBC Eureka, which is IBC v2, which will also support. That's a messaging standard.
Yeah.
What we're talking about right now are verification layer primitives.
Right.
And on top of these verification layer primitives, you can pretty much build any or layer on any type of messaging standard. Meaning that if there are standards that emerge in the Ethereum ecosystem, we'll also be able to support those as well. Although we will be pushing IBC. But there's a big difference in the assumptions between IBC and a lot of these other messaging standards. IBC is the only messaging standard that assumes that a message may or may not be received. Every other messaging protocol that we've looked at, messaging standard that we've looked at, assumes that the message will be received.
Are people wrong to make that assumption? Or protocols wrong to make that assumption?
I think it's fine to make that assumption if you're the one operating the protocol and you're going to you will guarantee that everything gets sent, because if you don't guarantee that everything gets sent, the user gets their funds stuck indefinitely.
Yeah.
If you do a token transfer and the destination transaction never makes it there, your funds are locked forever.
I would actually say a different thing. I actually am not sure if it's okay to assume that a message will be received. No, I'm being serious. When you're sending a packet of data over the web, you would have retry logic, try-catch logic.
Yes,
All of this is primitives in Web 2 communication, systems communication.
I mean, this is how IBC was built. Like IBC has the ACK message that comes
Exactly.
from it.
And one thing I really like about that Bo has been saying, I just want to make sure we touch on this before we move past it. The ethos of IBC as this credibly neutral standard is clearly core to how Polymer has treated building an interoperability protocol. Insofar as there's not a canonical DeFi app that's deployed on top of it that they have vertically integrated and have removed the opportunity for competitive teams to build, right? And so it means that if you want to build a token bridge, you can do so on Polymer. If you want to build, a DEX, you can do so on Polymer. The same way you can do this on IBC. There's no corporation of IBC owning another business on top of it that's dog-fooded and removed the competitive dynamics around it being a shared standard.
Yeah, we're not king-making any cross-chain app.
Yeah. So just so I get this straight, so Polymer provides the primitive that enables interoperability between chains. People can use IBC. I mean, they can implement IBC on this primitive if they so wish to enable token transfers.
It's implemented.
Oh, you have it implemented already.
It's implemented. Yeah.
All right. So, if you want to do token transfers between Base and Optimism now, you can use IBC to do that.
Yes.
Okay, that's cool. I mean, this is effectively the first implementation of IBC across EVMs.
Yes. Oh, also
Hell yeah.
Under the hood, this might sound kind of funny to people. Technically, we're the first Cosmos rollup on Ethereum to be on mainnet.
Wow.
Or just Cosmos rollup in general. I don't know of any other Cosmos rollups yet.
Whoa.
Wow.
Yeah.
I love this.
That's cool.
I love this.
Yeah, so Cosmos is still very much like in our DNA.
I love this.
Awesome. Guys, this has been really great. I have to listen to this again to make sure I capture all of the knowledge that was that came out of this podcast. But yeah, thanks and enjoy the rest of your week at DEF CON.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ed.
Cheers.